Hi, Rachel Medanic. Great to have you on the Comms Futurist Podcast. How are you?
Natalie, I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. I'm really excited to chat today, especially around your work with nonviolent communications. I think that is particularly relevant right now, and also some of the work you do around listening and employee engagement and that kind of thing. So, would love first just to hear a little bit about what you've been working on lately and what your comms career has kind of looked like up until this point.
Sure. I'll let me talk about Com's career. So I've been about 10 years in employee communications and engagement, in and out of internal comms, either working as a consultant beside them, as my client contacts, or in internal comms myself. Have done a lot of employee listening, and have been a communications consultant for also change management, digital transformation initiatives, and have spent about 7 years prior to that in online external facing customer communities for Cisco and Intuit, with also past chapters in marketing, quite a few years in marketing for technology companies, startups, and nonprofits. So I think that's a that's a
Nice.
good introduction.
Yeah, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about nonviolent communications and how you got into that specifically.
Yeah, I was drawn personally. So nonviolent communication is a framework of connecting. It's a simple framework, but as you use it more and more in your either your personal life or your work life, it gets more complicated, I would say. I started using it for interpersonal relationships and bettering communication there in 2017. I did some training and facilitating workshops around teaching it, in the just after the pandemic, 2021, 22. And what drew me to it was the sort of deep listening element that I already do in my work. So the basic framework is pretty simple. It's OFNR, which is not a fun acronym, but O is observations, F is feelings, N is needs, and R is requests. And it's a framework, developed by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, has been used around the world. There are a small amount of certified NVC trainers around the world, but it's been used for conflict resolution. It's been used in the workplace. There was a woman, I don't know if she still practices, Marie Miyashiro,
Mm.
who brought this framework into the workplace. And I do regular trainings and practice sessions myself around nonviolent communication, just so that I can keep fresh with it. Because every time I do a new training, I find another new angle that can be applied to the workplace.
Mhm.
So it's an ongoing practice. And I think the most interesting piece of it is that it basically allows anyone to stop before they react and think about what they're observing, what they're feeling, what they're needing, and how they may or may not choose to respond with making requests in response to all that. So it really gets at the sort of trickiness of business where I need that report by Friday is a business need, it's a business request, but it really doesn't talk about the humanity behind that, which, as I'm working through this methodology and learning, it's like it can feel awkward at first, but the reality is it ends up being more connective. And so I'm thinking about it as connective communication. It's basically compassion and action. So Dr. Rosenberg had talked about and taught many people that we all have inherent ability to be compassionate, and definitely workplaces and how they've evolved over time has really dampened
Mm.
those natural abilities, and this framework enlivens them, brings them back to life. So nonviolent, why is it called nonviolent? So any sort of judgment or quick assessment of what someone's doing with their behavior or what they're saying is considered violence in this framework. It's a
Mhm.
little bit ineptly named. I would
Mm.
say it's also called compassionate communication, But for internal comms, I think of it as connective communication because I'm communicating with you, not just to you, which is, that can be challenging if you're publishing a newsletter. So we can talk more about that.
Yeah, that's great. And could you provide some examples on how you have seen this applied in the workplace or how you yourself have applied it and how it kind of does connect to internal communications?
I think the most important use case for it right now, because I think the sore thumb that probably stands out for listeners as they're hearing this is, well, we don't talk about feelings in our workplace, or I'm not allowed to, right? So there's this psychological safety crisis.
Mm.
And different workplaces have different levels of psychological safety. And because I just came from a conference yesterday where one of the themes that came out was maybe work just really is a financial transaction.
Mm.
The whole
Right.
conference was about humanity of the workplace in the workplace. But it's like feelings. How does that fit? And requests. How does that fit? So it's an interesting methodology to bring to the workplace. But essentially, when you start to how I've applied it is if you start to see a behavior, like if someone says, um, I really didn't like what he did on that customer service call. So the basic framework in applying that is you can start to see didn't like. Okay, so I didn't like, right? Say I made the statement. Why didn't I like it, right? It forces you to stop and step back and ask why. Be curious, right?
Mm.
And that opens up a path for compassion. That's what's happening behind this framework. And so, but then go deeper, right? So as a consultant, we often like to go deeper to really suss out what's happening. So why didn't I like it? Well, maybe because I trained that person on not doing that behavior. So I felt, right? So I didn't like it because I trained them not to do that, but that's not really the humanity behind that. The humanity behind that is I'm feeling frustrated
Mm.
because that person still did that behavior. I trained them not to do it, right?
Mm. Right. Right.
So what's my need in that example? My need was for validation that I gave a training that stuck, and so I wasn't getting my need met when I made that comment.
Mm.
How am I gonna request, how am I gonna translate all of that into a request back to the person in a more human way to, try to affect the next time they get on a call with a customer and make the change in the behavior. So it's really if you can think about that a particular example as like, wow, that's really awkward.
Right.
Um, but there are ways to do it. And so, feelings I think is the piece that's the trouble child. Like, well, we can't really talk about feelings, but you can assess your own feelings in how you work. And you can start to see that a feeling is like, so we are the mountain, and feelings are actually the clouds that move past the mountain. Feelings are in motion. They're not who we are, they're how we choose to feel in the moment. So you see right there, like just all that, it's like it's not as simple as one might think when you apply it.
Yeah. And my mind goes to mindfulness here.
Absolutely.
I've done some meditation in the past, and I always say that the biggest benefit I saw from it was my the kind of increased gap between something happening and my reaction to it.
Absolutely.
And I think what you're describing is it aligns with that, right? Because it's giving people the tools to figure out in that gap how they're going to react and respond. And I think
Correct.
that is like such an important life skill across the board.
Absolutely. And that's why I think the secret sauce of this is that it starts with people who do communications in the workplace.
Mm.
You can do a lot of work on yourself by yourself in relation to interactions you're having with your coworkers, and they don't even know you're having these thoughts and you're working through this methodology.
Mm.
The change starts with you. And so you have to change yourself to start to use the methodology. Like, I've caught myself, like flying off the handle, getting, you get angry and upset about something, and I have to stop. It's hard at first. It's very self-confrontational.
Hmm.
It's like, wait a minute. Why am I feeling angry? What's actually going on with me? And I think that's really where the power is. I also see a lot of power in this for managers,
Yep.
who are, lots of pressures, managing who knows how many team members, just to be better leaders, and depending on the kind of organization they work in, to create, teams that are the safe space where even if just the manager themselves is using this framework, they can make a difference in how their employees feel, in some level of transparency about what's going on with needs and requests, right? So it's really powerful.
Yeah. I hear a lot of managers talk about how they're often the middle person between two employees, right? I have a CEO in mind who talks about this, and he said he was really trying to remove himself from that middle and encourage the team members to communicate with themselves. And I think that's great. And I think what you are talking about here with nonviolent communication, it really offers a toolkit to be able to hand to team members to say, here is how you actually can do that, right?
Absolutely. And I think that, it's a great toolkit, but it's a little bit easier. I mean, as a consultant, there's definitely opportunity in creating toolkits for specific types of problems, because it's not easy to apply this. But it is inherently, like, we intuitively understand it because we are all capable of compassion. And if we're not, or we don't feel like that's an inviting place that we identify with, we can take the time to look underneath that and try to figure out why. I mean, I think the other sort of challenging benefit that comes from using this is you can really start to get in touch with how unhappy you might be at work.
Oh,
Or,
yeah.
you've changed to a new team and you're having struggles communicating with the new manager. You can try to apply the framework to make communication better, but maybe ultimately, you know, the result is it helps you better connect into, gosh, I'm really not getting my needs met here.
Right,
It's and so it's challenging because it's like, well, maybe work really is a paycheck, and I can just ignore that, and I need the paycheck, so I'm going to ignore my needs. But as human animals, where we've come from, the Industrial Revolution, where we really were cogs in a wheel, to then sort of a little bit of the wellness age, well-being, and now that's falling away in favor of, the overshadowing eclipse, of course, is AI and efficiency.
yep.
And people are, FOBO, fear of being obsoleted.
Mm. Yep.
Right? So,
Yep.
and, one of the themes I heard at Responsive Conference yesterday was efficiency versus effectiveness. And I think, the dialogue is, we as internal comms people and communicators are starting to see that. It's like, well, I can be more efficient, but is it effective? Does it make sense where I'm applying it here? And
Yep.
so lots of ways this plays out.
Yeah, totally. I It's also, interesting. There's a lot of talk about cancel culture and
Mhm.
what that means, and whether we
Yeah.
should kind of be driven by those principles, so to speak. And I do like that this really does encourage some healthy conflict, and not avoiding conflict, right? Being able to do it in a safe space where both parties are coming to it with respect, right? Like that's kind of the foundational requirement, I think, for this, and it coming in good faith.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I've seen in my, sort of my personal social networks is some of the most emotionally fluent, deep, creative people. I can read what people are putting out tomes about current events, and within a sentence or two, you can see where there's still not, yeah, still, or where they're making judgments, where they're
Yeah,
making an assessment, where they're assuming intent, where they're not questioning enough, not being curious enough, and really are closed. closing down.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I would also add that it does take some emotional energy to do this, right?
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of people maybe just don't currently have that energy to give, right? And so it's
Right,
like I don't
right.
judge the people not using this framework, right? Because of that. But it is, for people who do want to explore it, I think it's useful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, it's as you were saying that, I'm like was thinking about the arguments behind, like, how many watts does it take to make an AI query? Well, how many calories does it take to apply NBC?
Totally. Oh my god, that's amazing. Yeah, exactly, like,
Somebody
it's not
gets the
easy stuff, yeah, it's
No,
uncomfortable.
it's not easy stuff. It's like I said, I really believe it is very self-confrontational, and it's
Mm,
painful. It's painful for me to walk through those thresholds, right? I
mm,
mean, I have a teenage kid and a family, and that's
yep.
you can use it at home too.
Yeah, yeah. So, uh, could we talk a little bit about some of the employee engagement work you do and
Yeah.
the listening and how this relates? I've heard a lot of internal communications professionals talk about how we should be thinking beyond employee engagement, employee experience, but really employee listening has to kind of be, I suppose, the first step in employee engagement and employee experience, right? And thinking about it more expansively, and making sure that there are two-way
Yep.
communications
Yeah.
channels between employees and leaders, right?
A lot of
So yeah,
companies
would love your thoughts on that.
a lot of companies don't have that. I've had the privilege to work with organizations that do have a lot of two-way communications platforms. D Several companies I've worked with have been on what used to be called Yammer, is now called I hope I get it right. I get Work Vivo and Viva Engage confused all the time, and the
That's
vendors
fair.
just melted as I said that, I'm sorry.
That's fair.
It just has a new name, but that was more two-way employee communication, and I would say, Teams is another sort of bidirectional platform. My sense is that perhaps outside of marketing, outside of internal comms, people don't really have time to put into that, even when I was doing more of that platform work. My more recent work has been around the first step platform, which is more unidirectional, communicating to employees to get a message to them.
Mm,
So I think that this work has to be paired with a human element because I've found when I'm the human element that comes in, people say the wildest things to me, but in literally being in the room with them, right? So 70 to 90% of all communication is nonverbal.
mhm,
So for that 10 to 30%, that's where a lot of workplaces are operating. That's where online communities operate, is in digital. What words did you use? How did you write the sentence? What did they say? That's a really narrow slice of the human being to be interacting with and to try to run an organization on, get insights from. And so that's why I think being in person is so important. Um, a lot of the people I've communicated simply just wanted to be heard. But the other piece that's outstanding with employee listening is companies aren't good at listening, taking the ideas, gathering them up. So for example, if 30% of companies are saying we need X, we don't understand why we don't have it. Maybe it's I don't know, a tool or a capability to make their jobs easier. What's important with the listening program actions that get taken is to take that idea and put it back out to the employees and say, we took your idea. We saw 30% of you asked for it. We gave it some consideration. We decided not to take action, not to solve that problem, and here's why. Right? You see, I mean that
yep,
that that a lot of companies don't do that. They just don't go that far, right? They do a glint survey once or twice a year and they set benchmarks and they look at, on a scale of 1 to 5, how happy are you in your job? How satisfied are you with your team members? It's like getting into the specifics and the details, having a human there to do it, which is that HR? Is that internal comms? Oh my gosh, OMG, who has time for that?
mm,
Right?
yes.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I say a lot. I have never worked at an organization that actually had an internal comms
Right.
function. And it's it's quite interesting. I just went to, this conference by workshop on
Mhm.
internal comms and employee engagement, right? And coming across people who are specifically internal comms practitioners, and then
Right.
people who are kind of like me who do comms, and internal
Yeah.
comms is sort of thrown in there and not really acknowledged or recognized as really part of the job. And I just think it's quite undervalued,
Absolutely.
and there is a really good case to be made for having a strong internal comms function because it does support business outcomes. I think just not there are a lot of people that don't realize that,
Right.
you know?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious, I know we've talked a little bit about surveys, and you mentioned the surveys, maybe it's a yearly survey that an organization puts out to
Yeah.
employees. But I mean, ideally, how would you define and measure employee engagement based
Mm.
on the work that you've done? How do you capture that?
I really like sentiment analysis. There's a function that I only got as a consultant to brush shoulders with very briefly that I really think is a great opportunity for AI. It's called organizational network analysis, and it is basically looking at digitally who's communicating with whom, how often, right? So it's looking at all the digital output that's happening. And again, this is completely does not apply to organizations that have frontline unless you're have the ability to kind of start to get into the text messaging that they do with each other or however they're communicating. So I'm leaving out, companies with frontline workforces or, where that I'm leaving that out.
Sure.
But you can look at digital communications and kind of see like who are the influencers, who are people who just communicate inside their team, who are people that communicate with other business units or parts of the business, right? And so it's fascinating because it actually is behavioral based data about where communication is happening. So I think it's a
Mm.
great opportunity for AI to at least analyze that data. And again, it's, these are luxuries that most companies don't have, can't afford. I do feel like that the human element is really helpful. And, as a manager, you can do that. You can get some feelings on one, but how are you then surfacing that conversational data, right? That,
Mhm.
what somebody is telling you on a one-on-one and rolling it up to your team report and then further. But, we're humans and we've lost that, right? Work is happening in all these ways that are so not human anymore.
Mm,
And we've kind of we've lost our way. And so,
mm.
how do I feel at work? What makes me happy at work? What motivates me at work? You could start to ask things like, did I go outside to work on professional skills? Maybe there's an opportunity in an organization where the question can be asked, what did you do to learn more about your industry that we couldn't give you? Right. I mean, that can be an indicator of someone wanting to, considering to change jobs.
Yep, totally. I want to pivot a little bit to something you had highlighted for me before today's conversation was this crisis in compassion and curiosity. And I think we've touched on it a little bit, but I would love to double
Yeah.
click on the curiosity piece and what your take on that is. I think that's really interesting.
Well, so I if you think about nonviolent communication, it is a framework for curiosity because we can't be curious if we're making a judgment, right? If you're assessing what someone did or said as right or wrong, or he should have done that, or she could have done that, those are activator words in NVC, not just judging something as right or wrong. But this bipolarity of could, should, like, those are the flags some of the flags that you can watch for because they're shutting down the opportunity to learn more, right? So I think the crisis in compassion that we have as a society is is inextricably, it's linked, right? You can't be curious if you're making a judgment and closing down. Being curious is asking why. Being curious is like saying, "Can you say more about that?" It's wanting to learn. And not just with an agenda, like, can you, like, there's different tones you can take with it. Can you say more about that?
Yeah.
Can be, someone being a little bit passive aggressive doing an attack.
Mm.
So you have to be careful about how you behaviorally use the words, right? I mean, it's like
Mm.
words are all we have, and I don't know if you've had moments in your life where it's like, I don't, words are not enough for how I'm feeling, for what I'm needing right now. And so even words are finite.
Yeah, I mean, I think about how emails can be interpreted, right? And, just in
With no
general,
tone.
and
Yeah,
I try to assume best intentions,
right.
and I actually really prefer voice memos, which isn't super
Yes.
conducive in the email
Super
format,
great.
but with text messages, I prefer to send voice memos because you get the tone of voice across. But,
Absolutely.
people do have different styles of writing emails, and I think I see a lot of women writing emails that are very almost apologetic in tone and in wording, as far as,
Yeah.
I just think, or, if you could please just, a lot of kind of just and softening
Yeah.
language. And
Yeah.
I think it ends up muddying the message. But
Yeah.
I do think the gender component here is interesting, because I
Yeah.
think a lot of women in my experience I've seen write these emails that are clearly meant to not offend. And I think that's just because people often read between the lines in emails, and there can be tones picked up on that weren't necessarily intended in the first place.
Yeah, no, I love it, and, I worked for an organization, last year where we launched, Grammarly, where you
Ah,
can select the tone.
yep,
Assertive, yes.
yep.
Which is useful to a point. I do wanna recommend, Erica Dhawan has written, it's Dhawan, has written a couple of books, but one in particular that I love that talks about it's called Digital Body Language. It talks about this tone in digital communications and what people say with expectations. I live this every day with my teenager, like, "What did you mean by that text?"
Sure.
Um, and so it's all in our lives, right? We've had to adapt to that. It'd be interesting to do a workshop on apologetic communications and just teach people ways to just better take up space. I mean, NVC is very empowering for that as well in how you formulate requests.
Mm,
So great area of opportunity for the framework to come in and help just people be more assertive and confident. And honestly, if your assertiveness upsets people, that tells you, that can be an indicator that maybe it's time to take your NVC radar and really take a look at that person and how they're
mm,
being, right? And what's going on. Are
yeah,
they an effective leader? Are they effective communicator or manager?
yeah, yeah.
Again, I may discover some things that make me make a career pivot. So,
Yeah.
but it helps you align to your own purpose. Like, are my needs met here? How do I feel? Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want to work for a purpose-driven organization. I don't know.
Right, what was the response when I did make the request?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And making requests is it can be a tricky, that's the piece of NVC that I'm still working the hardest to understand, is how to do that,
Mm,
especially in my personal relationships, because I think tone is so much. You can say words, but the way that you say them is really what I respond to. It's tough. It's tough going.
totally. Yeah, this is not an easy topic. I am going to look at that digital body language book, because I think
It's
that's
great.
really interesting, and I think
Yeah.
comms professionals, I think especially for comms pros because we do write a lot of messages. That's just the nature of the work. And so, yeah, it sounds like a useful resource given that we can't always hear the tone of voice in the communications we're writing.
Yeah, and there's the gender issue, and then there's the generational divide issue, which is a whole other slice of the onion when you're dissecting digital communications. You know, I think we could write several chapters on what emojis mean,
Yeah,
right? And assumptions that get made about pictures. I mean, pictures speak a thousand words. I don't know that I would argue that that applies to emojis,
right.
but other generations might. Um, so
Yeah, I saw something the other day and it was I couldn't even really tell if it was a joke or serious, but it
right.
was talking about the meanings of the colors of the different heart emojis.
Oh,
And so, like, a blue
okay.
heart means this, and I think this was specifically coming from Gen Z, Gen Alpha,
Okay.
and they were
Yeah.
defining the colors
Uh-huh.
of the hearts, and I was like, "Oh my god, like, people if this is real, people should know more about this because the
Right.
meanings are quite different." Yeah.
Yes, I would love to see that myself. I have struggled with what the colors might mean. I mean, I don't communicate with a lot of young people other than my own child.
Yeah.
But I would I would love to see that reference because um yeah. I try to stay away from the y- color choices for things like hearts, and there's certain emojis that I've just claimed as my own because they're sort of like my wax seal on the text message.
Yeah.
Usually it's
Yeah.
around a message of encouragement or hope or, farewell and I'm wishing you well and sending you blessings or whatever it might be. It's that little star in the circle. That's kinda how you know it came from me.
Yeah, I
I'm not
love
being
that.
imitated by a digital twin or whatever.
Right, right. Yeah, I've even heard of Gen Z, um, having kind of a preference so let me back up. The laugh crying emoji?
Yes.
Okay, it's
Well,
not the one
it's
with tears,
long
but it's not
ears.
the one with, like, rivers streaming down, but
Oh,
it's, like, little drops.
yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
So that one, right? So I think in general, right,
Uh-huh.
millennials have tended, I guess, to use that emoji to suggest that they are, like, laughing, crying, right? To me, that's what it
Oh,
looks like, right?
right. Mm.
Now what I've read is that Gen Z finds that emoji kind of cringe, and actually instead of that, like, for something that's really funny, they would actually use the skull emoji for a reason that I can't tell you. I don't know.
I
And
think I've
so
seen this with my teenager, yes.
right? This is the kind of stuff where it's
I
like, if you don't know this, I mean, it really can create barriers in communication between people.
absolutely, absolutely, and for
Yeah.
those of the younger generation that we are hiring and not taking their jobs away allegedly with AI,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
yeah.
There's a lot there. That's a good pivot to the future of employee engagement as you see it. Are there any trends you're watching or, any kind of predictions or theories you have in mind around what employee engagement will evolve into or look like as we kind of continue down this road?
Um, I think honestly, I think that organizations are so behind that I'm not sure much of the dialogue about what the future of employee engagement will change anytime immediately,
Mm,
like in the next, say, year. And I say that because, maybe I'm biased and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. Layoffs are high, unemployment is higher than most other parts of the US. I don't see a lot of attention on engagement or even on NVC like things in the
mhm.
immediate term. And I'm actually planning on that. I'm not I my work with NVC and what I'm building and developing is kind of when a wall gets reached and people are clamoring back for the human side of things because we're just initiatived out. We're exhausted from AI, and workplaces finally start to see and feel this, and they start to realize that more investments in wellness and well-being and tools are needed.
Mm.
So I think the future is ugly. It's
Yeah.
ugly in terms of people at work. Um, the companies that are doing this well are farther and fewer than between. There are bigger forces, right, about how organizations are run and designed. Like, I see growth in employee ownership as a pivot strategy for how you run your business. Not that that changes some of the sort of business drive. It doesn't necessarily. But I see a growth in B corporations, people, purpose, planet, profit. Um, so I think I'm not a future prediction person. I like
Mm.
futures thinking, and I have started to dive into that as a body knowledge as well. But it's murky. I my crystal ball is murky. That's why I think the opportunity for NVC right now is with people. Right? I
Right.
want to reach people. I think they are the ones who can best care for themselves, whether they're blessed enough to be in a workplace that they could actually talk about, having poor mental health or feelings or how they feel different or othered or how sad they are that, DEI initiatives were taken away,
Yep.
programs were de-invested in. I think that's further out, but at least they have the tools to help process it themselves and be more mindful about it themselves.
That's a really, really good point. Yeah. It's interesting to me how much emotional labor falls on the comms professional, uh, when you're taking into account employee engagement and the wellness piece. I mean, there's just a lot there, and certainly the intersections with HR. But
Yeah.
again, it's like we need to value IC professionals more, I think, because there's a lot there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the organization I last worked in, wellness was definitely owned by HR.
Okay. Yeah.
I think there is opportunity. I would love to see or maybe offer some sort of outsourced NVC ERG, right? People who want to, well, let's have an ERG that's devoted to developing our practice of compassion. That'd be kind of
Yep.
cool.
Yeah. Totally.
Um, do companies want to invest in that? They might, depending on their attrition rate.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
Maybe that would be a good place to loop in the front line. Some of the sort of market research and tasting I've been doing show that, frontline workers are NVC is a great opportunity for those kinds of environments.
Sure. What are you currently working on, and how can people find you
Um,
and work with you?
so I'm a consultant. I work both for agencies and directly for myself. People can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find because I'm the most digital Medanic you'll find out there.
Okay, great.
So it's Medanic. I'm super easy to find. I'm a member of the Ecology Internal Communications community that's run by Chuck Gose.
Mhm,
I am a member of Comms Consultants, which is a network of pre-vetted communications professionals run by Ashley Dennison.
mhm.
I'm quite present on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest. But at rachelmedanic.com. And also, through you, I'm pretty connected to this industry.
Great, great. Well, this was a great conversation, Rachel, and I really appreciate your time and
Thanks.
insights. And
Thanks for
again,
your questions.
I think this topic is especially timely. And yeah, I'm really glad we could chat about it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I need
Great.
the emoji cheat sheet though.
Oh my, yeah, I'll try to find that and post it on LinkedIn or
Oh
something. It
my
was really,
gosh, I
really
think people
wild.
would be like
Yeah.
quietly, "Oh, really?"
Oh, yeah, it
So
really kind
helpful.
of threw me for a loop, that's for sure. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right, well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Natalie.
Thank you, you too.